So, ladies and gentlemen, let's face it. For a kid growing up in the 1950s or 60s and involved in sports, there was two dreams: to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs or to play for the Montreal Canadiens. And one person who said in published reports many times before his passing in 2016 that he always dreamt he was going to play for the Habs was Charlie Hodge. Now, Charles Edward Hodge, born July 28, 1933, who unfortunately passed away in April of 2016, was born in the beautiful Quebec community of Lachine. Now, he always told people he was going to be a Montreal Canadian. He was very devoted to be a part of the Habs. Now, Hodge began his hockey career with the Montreal Junior Canadiens in 1950. By 1952, he began showing great skill, finishing with a 2.22 goals against average. Now, he played several years with the Junior Canadiens. Like I said in a previous podcast, you could play 5 years of junior at the time. And he put out some very impressive numbers, especially his 1952 and 53 season with the Junior Canadiens. In 52, he won 32 games in 45 starts, and 53 won 35 games in 44. Now, he played with all teams that were minor hockey affiliated with Montreal for quite a few years. He even ended up with an early incarnation of the Shawinigan Cataracts. Now, between 1954 and his first games with Montreal in 1958, you get this, he played with the Cincinnati Mohawks, the Buffalo Bisons, with a cup of coffee in Montreal in 55, Providence Reds in 55, Montreal Royals again in 55, Seattle Americans in 1956, and the Rochester Americans and the Shawinigan Cataracts in the 1957 season. But he was putting up good stats. The goals against average was a little bit high, but he almost won his first Stanley Cup in Montreal in 1955, but that 5 run only happened the next year. He played 4 games in the playoffs that year with one win and 2 losses. Now, by the time the Montreal Canadiens were looking to him to be a replacement or a backup to Jacques Plante, he spent a couple more years of seasoning with Montreal and Ottawa of the EPHL, and by 61 season, he was the pure backup to Montreal with 18 wins and 8 losses in 30 starts. Ended up back in the AHL with the Quebec Aces in 62-63. Called back up to Montreal in 64 with 33 wins and 18 losses. 65 and 66 were the breakthrough because he was a number 1 goalie in 65 when Montreal did win the cup, even though his playoff time was kind of limited. But he won another cup in 1966 by being the pure backup to Gump Worsley with 12 wins and 7 losses and 2 ties. Now, with expansion, Oakland took him, and he had some really rough years with the Seals. He ended up actually two different seasons with the Seals. First year he had as the number 1 starter, he had 13 losses, 13 wins, 29 losses, 13 ties. He ended up being with the original version of Vancouver Canucks in the WHL before going to Vancouver in an expansion year in 71 after another cup of coffee with the Oakland Seals. Now, the Jacques Plante trade ties in because when Plante was traded, Hodge was brought in to serve most of the backup times. Now, according to legend, Hodge's name appears on the League Championship Stanley Cup 6 times, although he only actually played in 2 of those finals and was with the team for 2 of those series. But because he was such a dedicated player in the minor leagues, Sam Pollock decided to put him on. So some people say 2 cups, some people say 6. Now, Hodge basically, not say lost his job in 67, but when Rogisha Vachon was called up, Vachon was playing too strongly and eventually led to Hodge being left unprotected. Now, the expansion to the Vancouver Canucks, it gave him and Gary Smith were the good duo that Vancouver need to be competitive. They also had Dale Talon in the mix and various other young prospects, Dennis Kearns and all that. Now, he didn't retire on his own accord because he couldn't get a new contract with Vancouver GM Bud Pearl, and he decided to retire. Now, he took about a decade away from hockey until an old pal called him up, John Ferguson, and he said this on the various CBC reports through the years. John Ferguson called him up and said, listen, we want you to help us out with the Jets as a scout in Western Canada. And he scouted some really top players over the years. Now, he also did amateur scouting for the Lightning and the Pittsburgh Penguins. He received two Stanley Cup rings with Pittsburgh in 91-92. And he scouted many top junior teams out west, including Vancouver and Chilliwack, and teams in the Lower Mainland in the British Columbia Hockey League, which some of the athletes I've covered through the years really had some seasoning there. So various achievements. He won the Turner Cup in the 64 in the minors, Stanley Cup championship as a goaltender with Montreal as a third backup in 56, 58, 59, 60, 65, and 66. Stanley Cup champion with Pittsburgh twice. Vezina Trophy winner 64 and 66 with Gump Worsley. He played 3 All-Star games and named to the NHL second All-Star team in 1964. Even though, like I said, he wasn't a playoff fixture, his NHL totals ended up being 358 games with 150 wins. AHL totals 195 games with 86 victories, and the NHL playoffs only 16 games, but the consistency in the playoffs allowed his teams to be competitive without that big goalie like Ken Dryden. So in my opinion, Charlie Hodge was a 3.5-star goalie. He basically did whatever was required of him by Montreal. He was always there. But you got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, when you have Jacques Plante and Gump Worsley as a number one, there wasn't much room for Charlie Hodge. You had to wait for players, because not to sound weird, the reason why they played Charlie Hodge, they figured with expansion, if Charlie Hodge was an overachiever, they could keep him, but he was an underachiever or another young player came up. Would you keep a younger player at 23, or Charlie Hodge, being at the time when the expansion came in, he was 34 years old? Do you keep a Roger Vachon, or do you let Charlie Hodge go? But I do remember, not to sound completely bizarre here, but the Oakland Seals jerseys and the Canucks jerseys were so, not say bizarre, but to see somebody like Charlie Hodge finally getting a chance to play, and like my dad said, being put in such ugly jerseys, because the Montreal Canadiens jerseys were quite nice and quite classic, like the Maple Leafs, but the early Oakland A's, Freudian slip because Charlie Finley won the team, the Oakland Seals jerseys were just, I don't know what was going on there. Vancouver Canucks just kind of a West Coast seat. So, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for listening. Give me a like, subscribe, or a comment. Everything's appreciated. But this podcast is kind of a continuation of the number of years that Montreal had some of the best goalies in the pike in the NHL. Let's look at it again, just to recap here. Backwards. Michel Place, Wayne Thomas, Michel Larocque, Ken Dryden, Roger Vachon, Denny DeJordy, Philip Muir, Charlie Hodge, Gump Worsley, and countless other prospects. But you can imagine if you kept Esposito and Dryden. That's number one. Number two, Grant Fuhr and Andy Moog in the 1960s and early 70s. Amazing. You only would have lost 5 or 6 games. But Esposito once said, I wanted to play 70 games and I had to find a team to do it. Have a good evening. Bye.